Okay, I think we can start now. And welcome to a very important meeting, the presentation of the UNTWIST project. UNTWIST project is a research initiative founded under the European Union Horizon Europe program, including nine partners from Spain, from UK, Germany, Switzerland, Hungary, and Denmark. This project has been running from February 2023 until the March 2026. The main goal of the project was to better understand the growing political narratives used against anti-gender equality. And I think that today, we'll see, but today the UNTWIST project help us to better understand how this anti-gender narrative works and what can we do with it. And like we see in recent years, we have all seen the same things happening across Europe. More and more politicians, NGOs, anti-gender media are attacking gender equality. I know it from Poland, I know it from Brussels, from Croatia, and I think that everybody knows this subject very good. They are attacking women's rights, they are attacking gender equality, they say that feminism is something radical, but we know that they are coordinated, they planned, they are very good financed, but what I think that anti-gender movements and they do not give people any solution. They just create this cultural war. They lie many times. So the question is for us very simple: how we do respond for this. But I would like to say something very important for me, and I think this is very important for all democratic families, that gender equality is a core of value of the European Union. It is written in our treaties. It is a part of who we are here in the European Parliament as a democratic societies. And I am the host of this meeting today, but from my left side is sitting my very good friend from the Renew Party, Lucia Yar, and I would like to give the floor for 5 minutes for Lucia. 5 minutes? No, okay.
So you to be that generous for 5 minutes, but I wouldn't take 5 minutes because I think all of us are mostly interested in the research. This is what we all came for. As was said, welcome everybody. My name is Lucia Yar, coming from the Renew Europe Party, and I'm very glad that we have you here. This is actually another event that we are hosting with Joanna on gender-related issues, and actually one we hosted less than a year ago stirred so much interest that I didn't have any kind of bigger backlash back home in Slovakia than on that event. So I hope that this is going to be at least that much interesting as well. So one thing that is pretty clear here is that the new anti-gender movements are very well organized, very good, very well financed. This was the topic that we discussed in the previous event that we had together. And it is clear that it is not just a cultural debate or a spontaneous backlash, but it also has been structured, well-funded, supported by powerful actors, including oligarchs, religious donors, and at times even by public funding. So this is why research like the one that we will be hearing about today is really important for us as politicians and for the civic society, civil society, and for people ultimately. It helps us to understand what we are financing and how to respond. Understanding the structures and the funding is only one part of the picture. What the UNTWIST research is showing us is something even deeper. Across countries, political frustration is often rooted in very concrete everyday concerns, right? Access to healthcare, we hear about affordable housing, stable jobs, ability to balance work and family life. These are all issues and these all matter. But because anti-gender narratives do not appear in a vacuum, this is why we need to connect these dots. They gain traction because they offer simple explanation for these broader frustrations and complex issues. The key question is not only what people believe, but why these narratives resonate. The real political task, also for us as politicians, is to respond to people's lived realities, to design policies that reduce insecurity, rebuild trust, and show that institutions can deliver. Coming from Slovakia, I can say that this is not an abstract debate. We see how anti-gender rhetoric has moved into political mainstream. I think you know it from your countries as well. And in conversations with citizens, and I've been really traveling across the country, it is showing up as well. Many people are not rejecting gender equality as such. They often are afraid of the word itself. But when people feel insecure, unheard, or left behind, spaces open up for narratives that channel such frustrations in harmful way. So we, as politicians, have a responsibility to act, and to act at the root of the problem. That means having the courage to look beyond the surface of the debate and to address the conditions that make these narratives politically plausible in the first place. I hope that today's discussion will help us to create and work on such policies. We keep on doing it, not only in the FEM committee for equality, but I personally also try to take space, especially in the areas which have been dominated by men. I sit in a budget committee dealing with money, in a security and defense committee dealing with our security. And these are also the ways how I think that we all should take place and bring these ideas that I'm also curious to hear more about into the places where they often didn't heard about. So thank you very much for this. I'm very much looking forward to hear all of our experts.
Thank you, Lucia. I think this is not the last meeting about this subject. Yes, and I would like to give the floor for our more to co-host. Maybe the first one will be Lina Galvez, the chair of the Women's Rights and Gender Equality Committee. She will be online. Okay.
Hello, everyone. I would like to be with you today, but unfortunately it has not been possible. So why this video? In the current mandate, I have had the honor and the privilege of being elected chair of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality in a key difficult time for global backlash on gender equality, a real difficult one. However, I firmly believe working for the rights of women and gender equality is the best way to defend our democracies, the European project, and the human rights worldwide. There is no greater cause than fighting for the future of Europe so that girls and women can live free from violence, who we aspire to be. The fight for equality cannot be weighed because talent, it is equally distributed, but opportunities are not. To build a greater Europe, a global reference point where women are not poorer and worse off than men, we must ensure women are included in all decision-making spaces that shape our present and our digital, green, sure, and fairer future. Women should be involved in shaping our knowledge and culture and not undervalued because they are women. We are women. Across the globe, here in Europe, there is a democratic deficit when it comes to women, which we must eliminate. We can only achieve this by advancing gender equality policies and mainstreaming gender equality in all areas of policy and all over the policy cycle. The challenge ahead is significant. Equality is a democratic and moral principle that requires commitment action and collaboration from all of us. I firmly believe in the strength of European women and men who join us, who stand with us as we strive to resist this new wave, fascism, this new wave, fascism, and or whatever we want to call it, and to dream of a better, fairer, and equal world. This is why both the FAM Committee and the European Parliament are not only pushing to lead the way against this gender backlash, but also to really advance in gender equality, as it is stated in our treaties. FAM Committee has agreed the upcoming legislative and non-legislative work, and one of the reports in which we will be working in is the one about women's rights and oppression, building a European response to backlash against gender equality in light of the global funding cuts. A backlash we need to combat. For that, we need the best possible knowledge. And here's where you come. And let's hope it could contribute to reverse the backlash. And let's work all together for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now it's my pleasure to invite Hilly van Strik. She is from the EPP party. She is with us online. She's Secretary General of EPP Women. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, dear friends and researchers of the project. Well, I'm happy to join the panel. And thank you for inviting me as a representative of EPP and EPP Women in this official presentation. I'm happy to join the panel here. I am Secretary General of EPP Women, and I have a background in political and women's history. Well, today is a peculiar day. We have municipal elections in the Netherlands right at this moment. This once again is a litmus test for our democratic resilience in the Netherlands. Today also, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the EPP, the European People's Party, which, as we speak, is going on elsewhere here in Brussels. Most EPP members of the European Parliament take part in it. So my sincere apologies, they are not here. And be convinced, we sure will give exposure to the outcomes of the UNTWIST project after today's launch. Well, it is clear that the handbook is highly relevant, not only for the EU institutions, but even so for all political parties, and not only for the countries that were part of the research with Europe-wide. I therefore highly welcome the handbook and look forward to the presentation. The executive summary that I already read gives a preview that invites and encourages to learn more. The findings are convincing, and my compliments on the thorough research method using well-substantiated scientific evidence. Compliments for the teams and universities that contributed to the projects, and congratulations with the deliverable of a practical handbook with concrete recommendations. What struck me in the first place is that the results of the projects are awareness-raising. As women's organization, we focus on women's rights and gender equality. Our, and at least my assumption was that views on gender and gender equality contribute to the growth of the electorate of the right-wing populist parties. That being fed up with feminism and gender equality is the main reason to vote against mainstream center-left and center-right parties. However, as the UNTWIST research pointed out, this is mere a symptom hiding the real causes. The real causes lie in the 5 topics that the presentation will show us in more detail: health, housing, work-family balance, care responsibilities, and the labor market. The first lesson I learned already now, is that we as mainstream political parties and women's organizations within these parties have to study these findings carefully and consider effective policy proposals to address these real concerns on EU level as well as national level. So as political parties and women's organizations, we thus have to face the challenge of the strategic implications of the UNTWIST research that democratic resilience depends on restoring visible material responsiveness in every domain of security, everyday domain of security. If institutions and parties, of course, respond to anti-gender mobilization only at the level of discourse by defending values or correcting disinformation, they and we are merely addressing symptoms. So there are a few issues from the executive summary that struck me, and which I want to highlight shortly. First, the relevance of the outcomes for the European economic development. In the EPP, we talk a lot about competitiveness. We aim to boost Europe's economy as being urgent to keep up our global position in the geopolitical turmoil of this moment. So I welcome the recommendations of the European Pact for the Health Workforce, as well as other measures. One of the other measures is also the topic of work-family balance, which is highly relevant also in this sense. A good work-life balance contributes to social well-being, giving men and women, young and old, the opportunity to prove their talents in the labor market, as well as in taking care of children and family. It contributes to EU competitiveness. The topic of work-family balance, therefore, is not hindering competitiveness. On the contrary, it is a necessary prerequisite for our economic future. Therefore, I also strongly underline the recommendation to strengthen the implementation and enforcement of the Work-Life Balance Directive from 2019. In the EPP, the implementation of this directive has been on our agenda since 2019. And we notice that our national religious organizations need our permanent support to get the implementation on the agenda of their respective parties, parliamentary caucuses, or governments. The handbook gives us new and strong tools to go on. The handbook really can be used for agenda setting by women, other lobby organizations. It therefore deserves a broader impact than on the EU level alone. The policy recommendations are at least as relevant to national governments, political parties, and NGOs. So the launch of this handbook today is only a start. The handbook deserves the attention of all those who develop and shape political policy wherever in Europe. So I look forward to the presentation of the results in due time, shortly. And I look forward to the follow-up, but this is only the start. The end. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hilly. I hope you will be with us during the presentation. Yes, thank you. I see you. And I would like to give the floor now to our researcher team. On my right side, Antonia Ruiz. No. Eduerne Bartolome Peral. Yes. Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of Deusto. Antonia Ruiz. Yes. Jimenez, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University Pablo de Olavide and the Scientific Coordinator of the UNTWIST project. Giuseppe Cartney, postdoctoral researcher at Searland University, working at the Chair of Political Science on European Integration and International Relations, and Kathleen Tardos, Senior Researcher Fellow at the Han Ren Center for Social Science Institute for Sociology. And now the floor is yours. I don't know who will be starting, but probably, yes. Antonia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So yeah, we are seeing the slides in the screen. Good. So good afternoon. Thanks for being here today. Is it an honor to be here presenting our key finding and policy recommendations for this project here today. So, as has been said, UNTWIST is a multi-country research initiative examining why gender equality has become increasingly become the object of political backlash across the European Union, and what does this mean for democratic responsiveness international and European terms. But before we start the presentation, I would like to thank all the persons who have made possible our presence here today. Of course, I want to, first of all, thank the co-hosting of the event by the Social and Democrats and the Renew groups and the representatives here today in the table, the support of the FEN committee, and also the presence and the online presentation of the General Secretary of APP Women. Most of us, however, I want to mention Sonia, Sarah, and Katerina for their continued support and their patience. They have been key in every small and not so small but critical step bringing us here today. And I hope that the findings and the recommendations that we are going to present interest you. And in any case, the UNTWIST Consortium will remain at your service if you require any help, explanation, detail, or help in getting, analyzing, or interpreting our data. Next slide, please. So in UNTWIST, we start with a simple but demanding question. Why do political messages that oppose gender equality resonate with the electorate? To answer this, UNTWIST have avoided the common mistake of treating this solely as a matter of ideological abstract of value conflict. Our extensive research has led us to a different conclusion. We have found that the most significant insights come from looking at our citizens' everyday experience of economic insecurity and how political institutions respond or fail to respond to them. In practice, this means that support for anti-gender narratives rarely began with a prior rejection of gender equality. For many switcher voters, their starting point is economic pressure and limited institutional responses. When these concerns remain unresolved, frustration accumulates before it is politically articulated. Only after do political narratives step in to direct dissatisfaction towards specific narratives and actors. But the handbook that we're launching today is a safe roadmap to disrupt this process. The handbook that we're launching today translates a large body of empirical research into specific policy recommendations, but these policy recommendations are not designed to counter anti-gender narratives symbolically or rhetorically. Instead, they aim to reduce the material and institutional conditions that our research has shown make these blame narratives politically possible and attractive in the first place. In the remaining of the presentation, my colleagues will first outline the nature of the problem, then share our analytical framework. Then we're going to present 5 examples of our top-rated policy recommendations. And finally, we are going to explain the how and why we develop these specific recommendations. So now, next slide, and I give the floor to Edurne.
Hello, good evening, everyone. My name is Edurne Bartolomé from the University of Deusto in Bilbao, Spain. So before we present our solutions, we're given some frame, and we are starting by defining where we find that the challenge is, or where are the observation that we find across Europe. So we see that political messages against gender equality happen across Europe. This is something that happens in every realm, in every country, in a very coordinated way. So it's something that we live in our everyday life. And there is also electoral support for political formations that defend this position. So, but this is something that it's of our concern as a community, as a value community, as the European Union is, because it's a democratic problem. Any message against equality identifies a specific democratic problem, because equality is a fundamental value for our union and for our political community. So in order to solve this problem, we initially tend to look, a large body of our research that we have seen, they identify a very clear element, which is the cultural war. But we believe that even if it's correct, it's not the only element that we have to look at. So it's a visible part of the phenomenon, but we argue that it's both analytical and politically insufficient. We have to look beyond this, and because if we only look at the cultural war, we are focusing only on individual beliefs and values and attitudes, and we need to go a little bit beyond in order to understand the whole the whole problem. And where we locate is, as Antonio was saying, it's in the daily life conditions and daily life, and that is the material conditions that society are facing, under which those beliefs and situations become politically salient. So that is what we believe is the common mistake, that thinking it's only about ideology, or it's thinking about hate and feminism. Everything, we have to focus on one step ahead, one step behind, I'm sorry, and focusing on the material insecurity, and to focus on where this rebellion starts. And that is we have to look at housing, we have to look at not making our ends meet, we have to look at our jobs, we have the rising cost of living as a main problem, which is the material insecurity, as I was saying, and identifying that there were always this kind of people who believe they are losers on this situation, of this change, of these transformations, and they might feel or believe that the institutions are not responding to that. And if we only think, if we don't look at these material conditions, we would be only addressing the symptoms. So we have to look at how we restore this trust through material responsiveness, but looking on these material conditions. Please, next. So in order to, show a little bit our main messages and concerns, I'm going to raise 3 statements. I believe that all of you have a bag with a folder and a notebook. So I'm going to ask you to just bear with me a little bit on this, okay? And I'm going to make 3 statements, and just raise your notebook if you agree with the statements, and let's see. Let's take a pulse of the room, okay? Just to see. Let's participate a little bit, all of us, a little bit on this, okay? So, and I'm asking whether your political experience match our data or our assumptions. So the statement number 1, do you believe that gender equality policy has focused too much on symbolic representation and not enough on this economic redistribution? Oh my, yes, okay, excellent. Thank you so very much, because that is what we believe. And we are going to focus very much on this material situation by focusing on what we call the gender positional deprivation, and that we are going to elaborate on this. And there is a clear hunger for policies that reach the kitchen table, the house, the care, and the wages, and really our daily life experiences. So excellent. I think we are on the same page very much. Okay, second statement that we're making a little bit to frame our thesis in our project. Do you agree with that anti-gender movements are gaining ground in Europe because mainstream parties have created this kind of vacuum or an empty space by not taking enough, or not talking enough, or not addressing enough material needs? Okay, yes. So, well, I see that, okay, for those who believe yes, that's what we address, what we call the representation gap. Okay, there is a gap in representation where institutions are not really addressing these topics very much. For those who don't agree so much, we also understand that, because also we have perceived that there is this kind of, we identify what we call a perceived silence, that people who are really struggling, they just feel that they are unrepresented or somehow unseen. Okay, let's go for the third one and see how you feel about this one. Opposite sides could find or can find common ground if the dialogue is shifting or shifts towards shared material security, healthcare, housing, jobs. What do you think about this? Well, I think that you agree with me. Yeah, very nice. Thank you so much. So I see a little bit more skepticism here, probably, but we're also going to address this with our colleagues, because in our project we developed some citizen science and citizen co-creation workshops, and we found that when we stop talking about ideological values and you address this kind of daily life issues, these barriers begin to go lower. So, well, let's see. I don't know, maybe it's, unfortunately, I can ask you again after the presentation, but let's see how this goes and whether you find our arguments compelling in this session. So can we go next, please? So in the next slide here, what I'm going to elaborate is a little bit on these mechanisms, the gender insecurity mechanism. So from these material conditions that we find, we call it precarious life situation, to protest votes. How is this shift happening? How is this shift going on? And this is particularly helpful because we're moving on afterwards to my colleague Giuseppe when he was going to talk about this recommendation. So in order to address this recommendation, we need to move from this gendered insecurity and identify better the mechanism. So the starting point is, as we are claiming, this material insecurity and what we call the gender positional deprivation that happens in this process. So dissatisfaction begins with housing prices, begins with the whole situation of making life more difficult to bear, financiarization of the economy, growing inequalities, and growing difficulties happen and going on in all our daily life, work imbalance, and all this lack of stable housing in all this all the problem with families, responsibilities, and so on. And there is where we feel that gender positional deprivation, it's really getting stronger when we see that trust erodes gradually and we repeat encounters with systems that appear unresponsive, fragmented, and for us, fundamentally unfair because people feel themselves as somehow neglected by the system. And this positional deprivation also, they interpret the material difficulties and they experience profoundly different ways depending on the gender position of people. And that is where we jump to the representation gap, which is what we believe is a critical disconnection between these material conditions that we are addressing and the grievances and the offer in the political parties, and mostly the mainstream political parties. That is where we were discussing before, that when people find this gap and people feel that these gaps are not being filled by the political offer, we see the representation, the representation gap. So what happens next? This is only after the sense of abandonment happens and takes root that we reach this next step, which is what we call the contingent attribution. And that is when we see that blaming narratives emerge and mainstream parties are failing, or we feel they're failing to address the material reality or the gender political deprivation, or the political formations are really stepping with that simplified blame narratives that since we don't have any, but since we have or we've suffered the representation gap before, they offer these targets that are easy to blame in our daily life. And they are what we call the convenient targets on these. And then in the next step is what we find the strategic implication. So to stop this scapegoating mechanism or this scapegoating cycle, we must close this representation gap by restoring the institutional trust and by claiming to restore the institutional responsiveness in the everyday domains of life. And any political actors intervene only on the blame attribution, and when this blame attribution has solidified, they are already operating on this hostile terrain where factual correction of value-based argumentation has limited effect. So we are going now to, if we move next to the next one, we're going now to present some recommendations that might help to fill this gap and to stop this scapegoating narrative, and maybe, well, we might together find some sort of solution to the problems. In our handbook, we found, 25 very high level and very high performing solutions, where in this presentation, my colleague Giuseppe is going to present 5 specific examples, one of each for our core domains that he has before addressed. And we hope that these solutions, so high-performing solutions, will fill this effectively what we call this representation gap. So I give the floor now to my colleague Giuseppe. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Adorne. I hope everyone hears me. And so I'm Giuseppe Cartani, and I'm postdoc researcher at the Saarland University. And as Adorne just mentioned, our policy handbook includes 25 recommendations. So it's a long menu. And now we will talk about, I will present mostly 5 of the top rated, let's say, policy recommendations of our handbook. So let's say the chef recommendation of this long menu. So the first one concerns the healthcare domain that appeared in our data as one of the most prominent issues in everyday life of individuals. And the primary frustration that appears in our data that is considered as a priority concerns the so-called waiting list issue, in the sense that we know that around Europe, individuals in many countries sometimes need to wait months, if not years in some cases, for some treatments or for some checkups. And according to our theory, but also I might say with just thinking about it, we can imagine how this is a source of extreme frustration, a breakdown of the social contract, a very strongly perceived frustration in the everyday life of individuals. So what we propose here, and this is along all the 5 recommendations that we have, is to leverage European Union's powers, or in any case abilities, in order then to address these issues. And for this issue, what we propose is to create a European waiting list benchmark. That is a creation of a common standard that would allow to define maximum waiting times and would allow that to transform these perceived private issue in actually a democratic output, in actually some form of check and perception of the EU as a protective shield of basic needs of individuals that would allow us, will be feasible, would have a good impact, that would be easy to communicate. The second priority concerns housing and and the housing is another source of extreme frustration. We know, for instance, this is an enormous and crucial factor of social and territorial exclusion in Europe and beyond. So, and the problem is, in this case, also that citizens experience this stress at the local level. However, the solutions are perceived to be at another level that is not even national, but is higher, so the European level, because these are issues that are related to market trends and bigger phenomena, right? So our second proposal is to use European Union's unique financial and analytical leverage in order to create a dashboard that would analyze and control the housing prices around Europe and create a monitoring and a warning system that would communicate when the housing prices are decoupling from local wages. This instrument, this tool, could be also related to EU cohesion funds. And in order to meet some mandatory affordability targets, and this proposal, again, would propose the EU as a protective shield of individuals' life and individuals' main concerns, and essentially dismantle one of the mechanisms that is behind the gender positional deprivation mechanism, as we presented just a few minutes ago. The third priority concerns work-life balance or work-family balance, if you prefer. And this perhaps is even more related to the topic of gender equality, because we know that when there is a stress in terms of work and family care, and there is a tension here, a lot of times this is on the shoulders of women today in Europe. Therefore, what we propose here is to create the conditions so that this major structural problem and also major source of gender inequality is addressed, or at least is mitigated. And what we propose here is to leverage the EU regulatory floor, regulatory capacity, in order to bridge this representation gap in which individuals don't feel that they are represented by political parties. In particular, this will translate in our recommendation in a predictable scheduling and hour stability standard that refers to establishing a EU-wide minimum notice period for work shifts, and second, to strengthen protection against the precariousness of on-call hours. And again, as in the previous priorities, these will represent a clear example of how the EU can be perceived and can act as a protective shield of individuals' basic needs. Then the fourth priority refers to a topic somewhat related, that is the topic of care, children care, elder care. And as the previous topic, this is unfortunately unequally distributed, and most of the times is on the shoulders of women in families. So what we would like to propose is here, what we propose in our recommendation handbook is to leverage the social rights and funding leverage of the EU. So current service provisions and working conditions prevent many individuals to perform a basic family task a lot of times. What we would like here is to propose, our recommendation proposed to address three essential issues. First, that care leave is paid at a level that prevents economic precarity around Europe. The second point is that is legally protected. And third point is that is retaliation free. In this way, we believe in making these recommendations and these policies portable across jobs and between member states. We believe that this will definitely elevate a private struggle in a recognized social right and address one of the major mechanisms of the gender deprivation theory. So the fifth and last priority concerns the labor market. And somewhat as before, not only family and individuals struggle to the deal between work and family care, but also the labor market itself is perceived more and more as a dead end. Dead end because precarious contracts, stagnant wages, and a brain waste, in essentially that individual skills are underutilized in the market. So this is, of course, another massive driver of the gender deposition deprivation. And in this case, what we propose is a programmatic and financial, to use the programmatic and financial leverage of the EU, specifically through the European Social Fund Plus. And what we propose, our recommendation refers to clear pay and progression pathways. That means that if the EU funds any employment or training program, those funds must come with mandatory quality employment outcomes. What does it mean? We call essentially for transparency, and we call for create a credible and some, at best at least, a predictable pathway for individuals that enter this program in order to know what will be their possibilities after finishing these programs. So with this proposal, with this recommendation, we want to restore the promise of progress and again provide to the EU another tool in order to be perceived and act as a protective shield of individual basic rights. So these are just 5 of these recommendations. We invite you, of course, to read all the others. And At this point, however, I will leave the floor to Caroline so that she can explain how we came to these policy recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Giuseppe. And I will explain, after having learned about the 5 top recommendations, I will explain how we have arrived to these final conclusions and what the evidence of our research. It is very important that we listen to citizens, and so we could actually call our research methods also a science of listening. And what is important that we have adopted a mixed method approach, including both quantitative survey and 2 types of qualitative methods as well. We have implemented a large-scale survey in the 6 countries that participated in the UNTWIST project. In all countries, these surveys were representative, which is very important. And also it is important to stress that we could actually prove the evidence that the theoretical assumption of our research based on gender positional deprivation was true consistently across the different countries. Additionally, what was also important that to gain more in-depth knowledge about citizens' perceptions and opinions, we have conducted focus group discussions in all the 6 countries with switcher voters to really understand their narratives and also how they see and they perceived their own stories and in terms of related to the past, and also how they see their position in relation to the future, and how they also talked about different gender-based needs. Finally, at the end of the process, towards the end of the process, we have conducted citizen workshops. This was really, really interesting. We already had the results from the surveys and the focus groups, and we already had ideas about the main areas that actually came up with on the material insecurities. And we wanted to double check with citizens and also further develop recommendations and possible solutions to these existing problems. So based on these triangulated results, we came up with the final 5 areas of healthcare, housing, care, work, family balance, and the labor market. And we have actually finalized the 25 plus solutions in the process. What I would like to stress is that the results were really systematic and consistent across countries in terms of the major areas where problems, perceived problems by citizens existed. Thus, the results and the recommendations that we forward, they really provide a safe roadmap for parties, European parties, in terms of they can be both very good tools to reach and to talk to loyal members of different party groups, or also to reach out to those who are switcher voters. So it is important, also related to the methodology, to explain our rating system. Okay, so from the many ideas, how did we
actually prioritize our recommendations. And so please, I would like to have the next slide. And I would like to explain the scoring criteria that we have adopted. So basically, there were three major criteria: feasibility, impact, and communicative potential. So what do they actually mean? The first one, feasibility. This means that we have rated or the different solutions based on to what extent it really is consistent with the EU competencies, in what extent it can be integrated into the legal environment of the EU, and administratively possible to implement. On the other hand, the second criteria, the impact, this was related to really addressing whether we could reach impact outcomes, whether the insecurities that citizens were talking about, whether we could, to what extent they are effective in reducing these insecurities. So that was the second criteria related to impact. Finally, the third one is also very important in terms of what is the perception of citizens. So it's important that we can have very good solutions, but if citizens, European citizens do not perceive that the EU is doing something for them, the impact will also be lower. So it was also important to us to what extent is it possible to communicate well these solutions to European citizens, and whether what is the possible or probable perception of these. So based on this, we have completed the scoring, and you have been able to listen to the 5 top recommendations that we had based on this scoring. Next slide, please. I would also like to expand a little bit on why we have worked on the EU level, because this is important. And partly my colleague Giuseppe has also mentioned ideas linked to this, that, for example, some trends transcend the country boundaries and really are more important on a regional level. And this is very important. On the other hand, we think that the EU can play really a strategic role and could leverage and could really make these recommendations work and coordinate these. It would not necessarily be a centralization, because the local member states will be implementing these, but this is more a coordination and support system for the member state, for the national institutions and governance. Nevertheless, with this EU leverage, it is important, or it is possible really, to use the regulatory power of the European Union and really set up a standard for the European floor for social rights, or increase and reinforce these. Additionally, it is also possible to have a financial multiplier effect in which EU could redirect social funds to those areas which are the most or the top stress zones for the EU citizens. And also we believe that with this coordination and with the process of benchmarking, so and increasing transparency in terms of where countries are on different areas, it would be possible to set some kind of positive competition also between the member states. So with this support system, what we call the protected shield of the EU could be reinforced. So finally, I would like to give the floor back to Antonia to conclude on our results.
Thank you, Katalin. So yes, we have now reached the end of our journey through the UNTWIST project, and the large evidence that we have gathered has led us to one unmistakable conclusion, which is that the defense of the European democracy and gender equality is not one in the arena of abstract ideology, but on the material reality of our citizens' everyday life. We have seen that anti-gender mobilization is not an inexplicable starting point. It is a political outcome. It is the end result of a process that usually starts with economic insecurity and limited institutional responsiveness. When institutions remain silent in these core domains of grievances or inequalities, they create a representation gap, which populist blame narratives are just eager to fill. But the UNTWIST Handbook that we are launching today provides you with a safe roadmap, as Katalin mentioned before, to disrupt this process. We do that by focusing on everyday security. By doing that, we really address the root of the gender positional deprivation before it is transformed into political backlash. We have presented you with 5 top rated of our policy recommendations that utilize the European Union unique strategic leverage. And so our call to action today is easy. Let's go beyond the cultural world and return to a politics of material representation. To do that, we ask you to use the recommendation in our handbook to offer visible, tangible, democratic outputs, because that is a way that we show our citizens that the European project is a reliable partner in their looking for security and dignity. This is how we close the representation gap that we've been talking during the talk, how we restore institutional trust, and how we defend the shared democratic values of the European Union for the future. Next slide, please. So before we close the presentation, I need to mention that this project has been funded by the European Union under the Horizon Europe program, also by the UK Research and Innovation, and by the Swiss State Secretariat for Education, Research and Innovation. But of course, of the views and opinions and data and all the things that have been expressed here today are the only responsibility of the UNTWIST consortium and do not necessarily reflect those of the donors. So not the European Union, none of the donors are responsible for what had been said here today. Next slide, please. In these last slides, you have a QR to our webpage where you can find more information about our project. You will find, for example, several briefings, both in English and in the local languages of the partners with the findings of our main work packages. Very nice, you can access interactive tools that we have so you can explore our data directly. You will also find links to our raw database, including our survey, but also the transcriptions of our focus groups and our workshop. And you may, of course, contact us, as I said before, should you need any information, detail, or any help in using our data.
As regards the policy recommendation handbook, our expectation is that we can finalize it by the end of April and then translate it into a usable, readable way for you policymakers by the end of the summer. And that will be all for today. Thank you.
Yes, I think it's time. Yes, I think it's time for the questions from the audience. Any questions to our researchers? Okay, you have the, yeah.
Hi. Good evening. I'm sorry, I have no voice. Just a question. Could you please explain a little bit which were the target groups of your survey so we can have some further information already on that? For example, which was the ages that were targeted, or if there was any particular socioeconomic background that was considered? Thank you.
Any more questions? Maybe I will add the questions to you. How many people took part in the project? In the project, I think it could be interesting as well.
Okay, so the survey was a survey to the general population. So it was, how is the word in English? You know the word, Edurne was the responsible for the survey. So, yeah, but we came with a grid in terms of having quotas by sex, by regions, by different ages, sex, etc., etc. So all in all, it was a representative survey. But the main characteristics of this survey is that it overrepresented voters of anti-gender formations with anti-gender narratives. A boost. So it provided us with hard numbers that allow us for robust comparison between different political parties, because, you know, one of the problems that this kind of studies usually have is that when you start making comparison, you end with groups that are too small to make a robust comparison. So in this case, that was this is the characteristic, the add-on of the added value of the survey. There were a total of around 10,000 surveys made in the 6 countries, so more or less 2,000 something per country. Yeah. So.
Sorry, some of the countries with less population, I'm thinking of Denmark, had a smaller sample, but we were aiming at something around 2,000, including the boost.
So that was the question about how many people that you, okay. So it's, yeah.
Okay. Any questions from, oh, yes.
Hello. Yes. Hi, my name is Laura. I work at the EU Institute for Security Studies, but I'm here more, say, in my personal capacity. I have many questions, but I chose 3, if that's okay. My first one would be, how would you define anti-gender movement? Because as I was listening to your presentation, I was thinking, is it not more anti-women, anti-feminism? And I'm also wondering what would be the intersection and how linked these movements are to anti-migrant movements or narratives, if you call them, because I feel like the logic is a bit the same of scapegoating and also coming from material insecurity. So I wonder if the solutions here, the explanations and the solutions could be similar. And then my second question would regard your recommendations. Imagine that they are implemented. I'm wondering if the overall effect would not be more maybe increased support for the EU? Like, I mean, how do you see the effect of these recommendations translating at the national level? Because I think there is this perception also from EU citizens that the EU is quite far away from their daily lives. So, you know, if the EU makes like a standard, okay, what is the impact on my life? Like, So that's my second question. And the third one is more general. I was wondering, also listening to you, like we use, and I think still state governments use GDP and those kind of very traditional indicators to base like their policy on. And I was wondering if maybe as part of your project, you discussed using a more comprehensive well-being index, that would take into account these material insecurities, and also, into GDP doesn't go all the care hours that is spent on paid labor. So what would be your recommendations on that as well? Thank you.
We have one question from the, here. We have one question from the chat. So I'm going to read it. Okay. What is the follow-up? How do you plan to give exposure to the findings and handbook? Was or is it the part of the project, or do you rely on other actors? Which can that be, do you think?
So maybe I can start, and then if you want to add something. So, Laura, difficult questions. Really are. Okay, I'm afraid that some of the findings in this project came to us as a surprise. So we were not looking for the material sources of dissatisfaction that made people buy anti-gender narratives. We were examining, okay, what is happening here? What is people responding to that? And we came out in part as a surprise, not totally as a surprise, of course, because this theory of globalization losers were there. But that was, that was a genuine finding in the project. So we were not, for example, using any kind of GDP indicators or any other indicators to objectively measure this level of material needs. This came in the narratives of particularly of the switcher voters, because we were talking to them and we were not talking, they were not telling the history of why they left their parties they had voted for all their lives because they were so angry with feminism. No, they were not angry with feminism. They were angry with other things, and eventually they began to buy, to blame different groups for different things. So maybe this is also an answer in the kind of maybe a follow-up is now go and try to measure from an objective point of view this kind of things. So which will the effect of the recommendations? We hope, if we did the word right, that they will decrease the appeal of these blame narratives. If that translates in bigger support for the European Union, that is not necessarily bad. On the contrary, maybe. But I don't know if your question was if that will help the national governments, or how the national governments could implement policies that are designed at the EU level. I'm not sure.
Can I add something, or it was more? Oh, thank you. No, it was more about, I was thinking, seeing myself as a standard citizen, like, okay, the EU makes a standard on, minimum notice periods for work shifts, like to see the impact of this in my daily life and to have this reduce the material insecurity in my daily life, I feel like it's more dependent on national governments. That's why I was a bit, and in that case, do you think the recommendations would differ by country as well, depending on their context?
Okay, so that was something that we considered when we were drafting our policy recommendations, in the way should we go to have a national level policy recommendation, but really we didn't have the time or the resources within the project to go to the specific national context and now adapt the policy to that context. But I think it's feasible. Maybe that's something that should be done in the future. What is the follow-up? I think that I partially respond to that. We need to narrate the objective side of these subjective perceptions that we have now, and maybe try to give also national level policy recommendations. That would be nice. Now, how we define anti-gender movements. So our project didn't start with anti-gender mobilization or movements. It started with these anti-gender discourses in sense of as a very general frame, as this was defined in the call, because don't forget, this is an European project, is responding to a call. So all these movements that are trying to put rights back to what they were before. So bringing rights back in general. So not, yeah. I'm sorry, I don't answer very clearly your question, but is there anything you want?
If I may add up a little bit on that, related to this material conditions thing, I would like to insist a little bit and delve a little bit what Antonio was mentioning. For us, it raised bottom up. I mean, we were not looking at objective material condition indicators as a main target. So the complaints, this kind of discontent and the disaffection linked to the material conditions, something that raised from when we address the citizens in focus groups and also in the citizen science workshop. So I think it's something that raised, and we were elaborating that a little bit based on what citizens were mentioning, and just something related to what I'm saying. What's going to happen if the European Union would take the lead on these recommendations? Probably, I mean, we have something that we probably all know in Europe is that we see this kind of, when you were exactly mentioning, addressing the point, we see this kind of political distance. We see the institutions so far away, but in fact, so much decision-making capacity comes from the European Union. I think it would also help visualize that many of our daily life issues, it's really, I mean, the decision-making capacity also comes from the European Union. And that would be probably also a tool and a mechanism to making people closer. Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe I'm dreaming a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah, do not forget that one very important criteria that we use for ranking our policy recommendations, so only 25 get into the handbook, is communicative potential. So when the recommendation is finished, there will be a section there. Well, it says how to communicate what you are doing, so it is perceivable by citizens. So of course, some of those policies will take time, particularly if we're talking about structural reforms, but there could be others that act faster and maybe can, I mean, the communicative strategy is there in the handbook as well. So.
Yes, we have two more, but maybe we take the question from the floor, and then after three last questions from online, and then after we, of course, welcome everybody to enjoy the catering and some drinks, so don't run away after.
Thank you. My name is Rick Zednick. I work with an organization called Women Political Leaders, Global Network of Women Politicians. There's a lot to digest there. Thank you. Congratulations on all the work. Question I have is, some data that we have seen shows that some of the backlash is not just amongst male voters, but also amongst female voters, where in theory, you would think they are not losers of feminism. And so I'm just curious to know a little, and forgive me if I've missed it, but if you can talk a little bit more about how your research may have broken down along gender lines, and how much is the task to address not just men, for whom it would be intuitively more obvious they would feel like they have lost, but also women who are apparently being susceptible to those messages. Thank you.
Okay, I can answer that, and I even have a chart that maybe we can show. It's at the end of the presentation, one of those nice extra charts that I prepared. Go back. No, continue. Okay, so yeah, we had a lot of information here. Go on, please. Go on. And here we have losers. I mean, we have on the one hand gender positional deprivation. It is the perception that you feel that your life, not your life for people like you is worse than it was in the past, or it will be worse in the future than in the present. So that is gender positional deprivation. And it is positional deprivation because you're comparing your situation with those of men, if you're a woman, or the other way around. Now, on the other hand side, we have the concept of losers of feminism, and that is a critical step, not only what you feel that you have a position of gender deprivation, but you think that feminism is responsible for your being worse. And you can see that, yes, in fact, there are women that think that they are worse with this feminism that they were before. And there is something that arise in the focus groups. And one of the narratives that are there, for example, the group in the UK, they say that women there say that they were sold out in the sense that they experienced this second shift or two shift, or that they don't. This is related to the work balance problems that we saw before, in the sense that some women, particularly those who are in precarious position, with precarious labor, with low salaries, with dependent children or dependent parents, they really don't have the money to buy services in the market. They have to take care of their dependent, plus work, plus housekeeping. So this is this burnout, or this double shift that really make them think that feminism has sold a profile of women that is not them. It's other kind of women that is a professional with success in the labor market, who can buy services in the market for dependent or whatever. So in that sense is where we find some women that really think that they are losers of feminism, because they're not able to catch up with the profile that feminism is selling. I mean, of course, we know that there are diversities of feminism, but this mainstream feminists, they don't catch up. So in that sense, they feel as losers of feminism.
Okay, and last question. I mean, there are some nice things in the chat from different people saying that they will help you disseminate the research, and they are congratulating you very much. But since we're running out of time slowly, I will ask one question. How would the researchers reflect on the link between anti-EU movements and anti-gender movements?
So today we didn't present much about this, but behind some of these, it's on. Some of these results, there is an analysis of all the manifestos published by parties during the last 20 years in the 6 countries considered, analyzed through a new code book dedicated to gender. And the link here is quite evident, in the sense that this partially replies a previous question, in the sense that anti-gender interpreted as negative perception of course, women's rights, women labor rights, or for instance, rights concerning reproductive rights, or for instance, also LGBT community rights, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All these enters this wide picture of anti-gender movements, and essentially they cluster in some specific groups and some specific parties that most of the times are also Eurosceptic parties, and most of the times are also immigration skeptic, to use, let's say, an euphemism here. So, but it's not only there. The main result, I think, of this project, if I may, that is not only related to individuals, but also parties, is that parties often do not take a stance on these issues if they are against it, rather than taking a negative stance. And individuals also that hold sometimes not, let's say, progressive attitudes toward gender equality, they might hold some or may not talk about it, or sometimes they are totally in favor of the ideal, but they blame the system, etc., and some stereotype of feminism as the cause. So the main issue, so we see this cluster, I think, in individuals that have these opinions, also because, again, those that articulate these narratives are the same parties that articulate narratives about immigration, about Europe in a negative way, most of the times. But again, there is variation across countries and depends a lot on the specific profile of each single party. Yeah, is most of it.
Okay, any questions? No questions. Okay. And I would like to thank you. It was, for me personally, it was very interesting because I have been reaching these matters for years, but today I have a completely new perspective and new, perception of this subject. And for me personally, it's very interesting. And I would like to invite you for coffee, for networking, and I would like to thank you so much for this research, and I would like to thank you for our research team. Yeah.
Thank you.